I was one of the founders for SlideShare, and SlideShare got acquired by LinkedIn in 2012. And I continued working there for a couple of years. And in 2014 was when I was exiting SlideShare and LinkedIn. And it so happened that I had always been connected with the product ecosystem in India, having volunteered for many industry bodies like NASSCOM, like iSpirit. And it was through their connection that they wanted some help with specifically iSpirit. I was a volunteer with iSpirit right from their inception. And they wanted some help with a government consultation. So because I had some free time with me, so I was helping them out. I went and visited the Ministry of Electronics and IT. And that was my first brush with the government, actually. And that was also when I believe the government got to know about me and my background for the first time. So Aadhaar happened in 2008 or 2009. And by 2014 or 15, there were already close to 60 to 70 crore Aadhaar cards or Aadhaar numbers that had been issued, right? So Aadhaar was in the bag in that sense. And the government of the day was kind of considering that now that we have Aadhaar, and one of the key things about Aadhaar is that Aadhaar is built as an API. And the whole concept and the purpose of making it an API is that you can build things on top of it, things that leverage and use Aadhaar's API capabilities. So the government was in a broad sense thinking, what are the other products and services that a citizen could actually utilize in their daily lives? And they were thinking about something in the payment space, they were thinking something about in the data space. So that was the juncture when I joined. I think they had some very brief and sketchy ideas about something in the document and the data space, but specifically DigiLocker hadn't taken shape at that point in time. What DigiLocker does essentially, if you think of it, it is a key citizen pain point. I mean, we are all used to this. We all have various documents, certificates, mark sheets, and IDs that are issued by the government or some agency of the government over our lifetime, and we tend to use them in a repetitive manner. We take photocopies and then we submit it. So we are all familiar with that ecosystem and the problems associated with it. Now, given the fact that the internet had happened by then, Aadhaar's capabilities were well known by that time. So I think you can add one and one together and say, okay, what is it that we can now build using the existing technological capabilities to solve a particular citizen pain point. And in this case, the pain point being this repetitive use of papers and certificates and IDs, which is so slow, bureaucratic, it causes wastage. You can imagine it leads to delays. So if there was a digital way of solving that problem, that is what the government was thinking in terms of the DigiLocker platform. DigiLocker, I think one of the easiest ways to think of it, I think the idea is borrowed or similar to what a Dropbox or a Google Drive is, with one difference that in a Dropbox or a Google Drive, you essentially upload your own documents. So you are the master of what you upload, and any authenticity of those documents comes essentially from what you intend it to be. DigiLocker is kind of slightly different, and that's where the real power comes in. The documents are essentially coming from their respective government sources. So like, for example, our school certificates and our mark sheets are issued by the state education boards. The PAN database, the PAN number that we have is issued by CBDT. Our passport is issued by the Ministry of External Affairs. So what happens is that with each of these data records or IDs, they have been issued by some wing or some department or something which comes from the government side. So what DigiLocker does is that it's built a central thin application. It's a thin layer which is talking in turn to each of these individual data sources. And the citizen can actually fetch their citizen records via the DigiLocker platform, but DigiLocker does not copy that data. So that is a very key architectural design decision, is that DigiLocker does not have the data itself. DigiLocker does not copy the data. DigiLocker, technically, it's what you would call a consent manager. And consent managers are only about managing the data exchange. They cannot look at the data, they cannot manipulate the data, they cannot change the data. So the whole idea is that these documents or these data records that are being aggregated on the platform, they have to be kind of used in a certain workflow or a certain use case as part of maybe a government process, right? So on one hand, you have the issuers of these records, like as I said, the education boards, or let's say the CVDT or the MEA, or could be the driving license which is issued by Ministry of Transport. So they are the data issuers in the system, and then there are the data users or the data consumers. So for example, if I as a citizen am driving on the road and the cop stops me and says, hey, can you show me your driving license, right? So the driving license is being asked for by the cop on location. So they are a data consumer. And what DigiLocker enables is that I can, instead of showing my physical driving license, I can actually take out my mobile app, whip out the DigiLocker app, and from there I can show the digital record for the driving license to the cop. And and there's a whole legal system and a legal structure that has been built around it, because you can build an application, but how do you ensure that it is recognized by as a legally verifiable credential? It is something that the courts will agree to. It is something that the cop on the street, when he or she is shown this particular document, how do you ensure that they are going to believe that this is the authentic thing? So that is the whole power of DigiLocker, is that if it's coming from DigiLocker, it has to be secure, it has to be original, it has to be authentic, because DigiLocker is directly talking to the source databases, and it is enabling the data exchange for the data consumers. It's verifiable because that's the whole point of DigiLocker, is that if it's on DigiLocker, it is verified as coming from the original source of truth, which means it is credible, it is validated, and you don't need to kind of revalidate that is this the right record. If it is on DigiLocker, it is verified. Coming from the background of startups, working in the government, is that a lot of what we build, and it's very easy to think of the primary users coming from a background where they can just do it themselves. It's a DIY use case, or it's a self use case. But if you go to the villages, if you go to the semi-urban areas, if you go to absolutely remote upcountry areas, a lot of people there don't have the access or the means to kind of access that. Or even if they, let's say, had a mobile phone, they may not know how to kind of navigate through the app stores, download it, verify it. So the government often, what they do in these situations is that there is an assisted mode of delivery. For example, in the rural areas, the government has something called the CSC centers. And the CSC centers, somebody who's living in the villages can actually go to the CSC center and help, and they will be helped in setting up their DigiLocker account. And if they want to kind of, take out a printout or show that document to somebody, they can do it via the CSC center. So there are different modes of operation here. There is the self-serve mode, there is the DIY mode, and there is the assisted mode. QR codes have become ubiquitous now, especially after UPI, where it's become very common for people, and people understand now that QR codes are a way of verifying the authenticity. So similarly, the same concept has been used in DigiLocker, wherein the certificates have a QR code. And if you wanted to verify that, okay, is this certificate genuine, then the QR code can be read by the QR reader in the app itself, and that kind of validates that this is the original. Multiple ways in which we approach the design of the system. So I think the first and foremost is that building something from the government at population scale. So concerns like privacy, security, and consent is at the heart of the system, right? I would use the word consent is something which is key here, because DigiLocker also, as I said, essentially is a consent manager, right? And the government of India has a very important framework called the consent framework. So DigiLocker follows the consent framework. And in a broader sense, there is the there is something called the DEPA, which is the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture. So DigiLocker is kind of, part and parcel of the DEPA framework. And essentially what the consent framework essentially says is that the data belongs to the citizens, and the data is available in DigiLocker only and only if the citizen kind of, wants it, and the citizen wants to share it with a respective data consumer. So it is not possible to access anybody's data unless and until the citizen is in the center of that flow and the loop, and they authorize and they consent to it, and they say that, okay, I allow this, my data coming from this source to be used by this source. And you can specify, for so much time and so much, so the multiple things they can be specified like. So I would say that is probably one of the first things that consent is at the heart of the system. I think in terms of DPI, most systems are built on open standards, right? There's extensive use of open source. Open APIs are a big, big part of the DPI architecture and the framework. And you must understand that, governments by definition are built in silos, and that's by design, right? So data by design is fragmented, it is siloed, the left arm and the right arm don't talk to each other. So in many ways, one of the real challenges that we've faced building something like DigiLocker is that in a situation where the design itself is of data fragmentation, how do you build some kind of an aggregation layer? And that is only by ensuring that, the product and the platform it kind of completely takes care of data security, privacy, consent to the highest order and the highest level. Building something of this magnitude, of this scale, cannot be done without overcoming the challenges. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that so this is kind of, and especially when going back to 2014-15, this was a futuristic idea, a futuristic concept. It was an unproven concept. And so one of the things that you see happening is that, so there is this dichotomy between where are the legal provisions, where is the law, and what is the technology kind of trying to achieve, and is it allowed by law? And what has happened is that technology is kind of galloping at its own pace. It is keeping far ahead of law. So that, I think, kind of turns out to be a real challenge, is that you are building something at a very fast pace, and at a time technology does tend to be slightly ahead of the law. But once you kind of have something, you need to dial back and make sure that it conforms to whatever the legal provisions are. So I think that is something that comes up frequently when you are building these kind of DPIs, DPI platforms, is that not everything may be kind of streamlined as far as the legal provisions are concerned on the day you start building it. There is a process of iterative understanding and incremental development that is happening, and soon they kind of catch up and they are in sync with each other. So I would say that is one of the key things that challenges that we faced. Right, I think across the world, digitization is something which has picked up space both on the private side as well as the government or the public side. And what my personal experience with DigiLocker has been that the use case for DigiLocker is it's at the least common denominator level. If you can pick up any country and they would have some kind of a system whereby there is a digital version of the school certificates and mark sheets or driving licenses or their tax IDs. So every country probably has the need for a basic fundamental level data and document platform. So that is something that we have seen all across. What the beauty of India stack is that it kind of gives you a complete architecture and a framework for any country that really wants to kind of build a digital stack over its citizen services. Then how do you kind of go about doing it? You start off with some kind of a digital ID, then you can actually link that digital ID to something like a data platform. Then you can maybe have a payment related info system that is kind of built on top of it. So, and the whole value of the stack kind of increases exponentially once you have these various platforms working in conjunction with one another. I mean, you can look at the platforms in isolation, but the real power of the stack is when you actually kind of put them together, and then you can see that the value actually expands exponentially.